is very dire for a lot of people, particularly those who've never had jobs. There are many South Africans who've been without jobs for even more than 10 years in some instances. But generally, the number accepted or spoken about is that of 25% of adult South Africans who should be in employment are without jobs. Ann Bernstein has proposed a few ideas through the reports that the Center for Development Enterprise published recently. Now, Ann, we've analyzed the situation, and this happens all the time, but we've got to come up with solutions, and you've made it your business. You've produced reports in that regard. What do we do now with this situation?
Well, the one major thing we're proposing is the location of manufacturing is changing worldwide. There are going to be some 80 million jobs leaving China, low-skill factory jobs. Think if South Africa could just get a fraction of those jobs. And we're suggesting that in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, we experiment to try and attract those jobs. So we have an export processing zone run by the private sector, and we allow employers to negotiate wages with employees so that they can respond to global demand for textiles and other simple kind of manufacturing. And we're hoping if that could take off, this could be a demonstration to the rest of the country that we don't have to live with 7.5 million people who are unemployed. And this is not a fact of life. We can do something about this, and we can make this a much more labor-intensive economy. So that's one proposal. A second is that the South African economy is centered in the cities. We need to take the cities much more seriously, especially the largest cities. So some 60% of the economy is already there. This is the place where the most jobs are created. And we're saying it's time that we stop being reluctant urbanizers and we let power and resources flow to the cities which are South Africa's future. And we need to look at how we manage those cities for growth, higher growth, and for employment. And we need to look at how we integrate more of the poorer people. So we need a much better transport policy so that they can get to work, and we need a different kind of housing strategy. We're also proposing we should have directly elected mayors in the cities, in the largest cities. Think of New York, think of other cities around the world. You bring in some fresh blood. The A-team should be running Johannesburg, not, oh, I didn't get into the cabinet, I didn't get into the province, oh, I'll run Johannesburg. This is not how we should be thinking.
Well, sorry, just on that point, are you suggesting then, therefore, that cities are better placed to stimulate the economy and create job opportunities than national government policies can?
Look, we're saying that cities are the sort of, most economists never think about where growth happens. Where growth happens in the modern world is increasingly in cities. And that means cities have to become more important entities in our government system. Yes, we need a national government, but we need more power and resources going not to local government in general, to the largest cities in South Africa.
But in Gauteng, it looks like the cities are beginning to think that way. The more I listen to the mayors of Gauteng, they seem to be talking the language that you are.
Exactly. To answer your earlier question, that's a constituency. I think CDE's message can be heard.
Yes.
And we were certainly going to be focusing on that. And we have one of the reports focuses on cities and the kind of broad changes we're recommending.
But here's another challenge which you raised yourself earlier on. It's that of lack of skills in the economy and poor education, and therefore the marginalization of people in that regard. Now, two parts. One is, how do you create a growth economy that is inclusive on one hand, including accommodating people with low skills, and you transform the economy at the same time so that you have the black majority also participating meaningfully in this economy? What do you do then?
Look, the most important issue is we need higher growth, and that growth has to be labor intensive, and we need to change the laws and regulations to make it as labor intensive as possible. But we want everyone to have better and better jobs in time, and the reason that we're saying we need these low-skill, low sort of manufacturing jobs is because our education system is so bad. Now, we've done enormous amount of work on basic education, and the issues are, I think, pretty clear. We're not going to make progress until the entire cabinet mobilizes behind dealing with teachers who don't teach, who don't bother to come to school, or if they do, they don't actually do anything in the classroom. Until we deal with that, we're not going to make progress. Then we have to make sure that the training that teachers get is much better. Everybody acknowledges this isn't good enough. So there are very specific things we can deal with, and that requires putting the national interest ahead of vested interests. So we've also looked in this particular project at vocational education and training. There's some 3.4 million people who are not in school, they're not employed, and they're not in post-school training. This is outrageous. Now, the government is putting more money and effort into vocational training, but we're very worried we're going to make the same mistakes as we've made with basic education. We massively expand access, which is good, but to a terrible product. So we've got to
get the
think
quality
differently.
right.
We've got to get the quality right. You've got to use markets to help do that. You can't just have a state-centered approach when the state itself is in trouble. It's in decay, many parts of it. It's full of corruption. We've got to look at how we play to South Africa's strengths.
Here's another question, Ann. The private sector has been criticized for sitting on large cash piles. We're told 800 billion rands that should be invested in the economy that's not being invested. And the talk is that that is actually the problem with the South African economy, that the private sector is not coming to the party. What do you say?
Well, we write about this in our documents. This is a ridiculous idea. You will get private sector money invested in South Africa in much higher numbers if we get the environment right to risk capital, your and my pension money, on good projects in an environment which says we will support market-driven activity. If you have an environment like we have now, where we have crony capitalism, we have anti-business attitudes, we have more and more regulations that are swamping small business, which is in decline. All the talk doesn't matter. The facts show it's in decline. Unless we change the whole environment, we're not going to get more investment. So there is no strike. Business doesn't collude in that way. And anyway, if they did, the Competition Commission should go after them.
Yeah.
It's crazy. If two business investors were to collude, you and I would sit and say, gee, we see an opportunity,
Let's
we're not
take
going to
advantage
join
of
them.
that.
So it's a crazy notion.
Now, quick question as we conclude. What is the short-term quick solution that you think would begin to make a difference to what's going on in the economy?
Look, we're talking about there are no shortcuts. South Africa keeps thinking if we have a summit or we have a sort of big project, we'll sort South Africa out. There are no shortcuts. We have to fix the basics. I think that in the short term, if we had some serious signals from government, we're going to allow low-skill manufacturing to deal with unemployment. We're going to deal with the trade unions properly about labor issues and about the quality of teaching in our schools. You and I could very quickly come with 5 signals that a serious, determined cabinet could give the country that would start to change things. But it requires a change in attitude that the market is going to help South Africa deliver, and we're going to free up the environment to allow rapid growth to transform South Africa. It's the best lever we have to change millions of black South Africans' lives.
Ann Bernstein,
Thank
the
you.
Executive Director of the Center for Development Enterprise, sharing with us her views, her thoughts on how to get South Africa on a growth path, as well as creating an inclusive economy that creates jobs for millions of South Africans who've been without jobs for many, many years. Definitely an unacceptable situation that's going to lead to major crises going forward. We continue with the program in a moment.
What's happening, beautiful people? This is your host, Viwetwala, for the Ultimate Sisters Show. And of course, I'm getting pampered like a queen. If you want to catch more of the unfoldings of this week's episode, don't forget to watch me as I catch up with my guest, Tumelo Mututwana. Don't miss out.
Welcome to our Money Move slot, brought to you by 274 Investment Managers. And this is where your money is taken care of. But first, you need information that will empower your decision making. tonight we're going to discuss the difference between savings and investments, as well as familiarize ourselves with EFTs. We're joined by specialist Nerina Fesser. Nerina Fesser, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
And,
Thanks for having me.
Much appreciated that you made time to be with us.
Sure.
As one of the specialists who can help us understand a few of the terminology that experts like yourself use. But let's start with the everyday stuff. Savings versus investment, because many of us think that it's one and the same thing, but not exactly. These are two different concepts. Explain.
Exactly. So I guess the idea that one puts money away is the same thing, but it's where you put it and what will you get for that money. Saving is typically something that you will do with a bank, and you will earn an interest rate for that. So you put 100 Rand into the bank. If the interest rate is 5%, it means after a year you will get 105 Rand.
Yes.
You know exactly what you're going to get. You're not going to get more, but you're not going to get less either.
Yes.
Investing is something different. Your 100 Rand is used to buy something, and the value of what you buy can go up and it can go down. And if you're investing in the stock market, for example, it means that you can also maybe earn dividends on that money. So your 100 Rand that you invest in the stock market might go up to 110 Rand, or it can fall to 90 Rand. And maybe you'll get some dividends. So that's really the main difference. The certainty that you get with saving, the uncertainty of investing, but at the same time, the potential to get a lot more than you would if you were just saving money in the bank.
Well, before I ask the risks attached to either of the two concepts, I want to talk about the fact that the cash, the savings gives you